Hello, everyone. Welcome to the CAYL Catalyst webinar series. I'm Valora Washington, CEO of the CAYL Institute. That's CAYL, as in Community Advocates for Young Learners. We are so happy to have you here today. It's really my honor to welcome you to this webinar series. Our goal is to bring you timely, relevant, and immediately actionable topics of interest for young children and the people who work with them. So thank you so much for joining our webinar series today. And if this is your first time, we particularly welcome you. We come together as a community of early childhood educators to think about the big picture of what's happening in our field and the topics that are of interest to you. And on Monday or Tuesday after this webinar, you will receive a follow-up email with resources that we refer to today so that you can dig a little bit deeper into the topic that we're talking about. We offer this webinar series at no cost to participate. Of course, if you are ever interested in making a tax-deductible donation to the CAYL Institute, we greatly appreciate that. At the CAYL Institute, our work is focused on 5 core values, and that is building and sharing knowledge. We're focused on solutions. We want to make an impact in our early childhood community and create innovations, but also we have a very deep commitment to diversity and representative leadership. In fact, CAYL has its roots in a 2005 study about the lack of representation of people of color, specifically Asians, Latinos, and Blacks in the early childhood policy landscape in Massachusetts. And this study was published in Young Children and received a great deal of interest. And it is really the basis of a lot of what we're talking about today. We're talking about representation. And representation really matters. It matters a lot today as we see more than ever a dramatic increases and changes in the demographic mix of young children in our nation and also in our workforce. I think of what Judge Sotomayor said when she said, "You can't be what you can't see." And this brilliant judge was the third woman, the first woman of color, the first Hispanic, and the first Latina to serve on the Supreme Court. That is a lot of firsts. So we think about the growth in the number of Latinx children in our communities, and we ask so many questions. How can we make their learning environments more responsive to their needs? How can we bring Latino practitioners and policymakers into the field of early childhood education? Representation of all children matters a lot for us for many reasons. We allow children who see themselves and practitioners who see themselves represented, allowed to dream bigger about their future. It encourages all of us to imagine ourselves in new cultures, experiences, and situations. We can use representation as a transformative tool to change our minds, our hearts, and our policies. And in doing so, we're sending a message to everyone that everyone can be welcomed, seen, and heard. Representation has the power to transform the ways that our future generations see themselves and also the way our workforce sees themselves. We represent a larger narrative with our children through storytelling, toys, books, educational materials, great places to start. But we also have to share leadership as adults in educational and policy spaces. Representation opens the door to many opportunities and voices and journeys to be heard. Through representation, we are acknowledging, we're validating that the lives of everyone affected by racism and discrimination really matters. And everyone is impacted by racism and discrimination. So representation matters because it can help shape our national narrative and inspire our people. As we start today's webinar, why don't you just take a moment to write in the chat about why representation matters to you? And specifically, we'd love to hear your comments on today's topic, which is why leveraging Latinx leadership is important. So, as a prominent Mexican American journalist and author says, my only weapon is the question. So we're raising these questions of representation to you today, asking you to think deeply about why representation matters. And then we think about the Dominican American designer, Oscar de la Renta, who said, "Your great strength is knowing who you are." So we need to know who we are as early childhood practitioners, and we need to know who we're serving. And as we think about these questions at the CAYL Institute, we have a lot of resources, such as those you see on the screen in front of you. And these resources represents learning lessons that we've learned from educators like yourself as we explore these issues. So today, we want to present to you a new three-part series that we're starting today called Leadership Dilemmas. In these leadership dilemmas today, we're going to focus on how we leverage Latinx leadership. And next month in June, we're going to explore the leadership dilemma of how we can leverage funding for our field. Many of you are aware that there's a funding cliff coming from the COVID funding. And so how can we address this now ahead of time? And in July, we're going to explore the issue of the next generation of leadership and how we can really prepare the next generation of leaders to take on this mantle and continue this work. But today, I'm excited that we have the opportunity to hear from 3 Latina leaders about their journeys and the possibilities for leveraging Latina leadership in research, in policy, and in practice. And we begin with my colleague on the CAYL board, Marta Rosa. Marta Rosa has served in very many senior executive level leadership positions, including being the Chief Diversity Officer and Director of Government Affairs at Wheelock College. She has also worked in higher education. She worked as executive director for a large early childhood not-for-profit organization focused on families and care and services that children were receiving. She's worked at the state level mostly, leading policy and program development efforts for children and families. She was among the very first Latina elected officials in Massachusetts, serving on both the school committee and the city council for Chelsea, Massachusetts. And she's been appointed to various governors' commissions. Next, we're going to hear from Natalie Vega O'Neill, who is the president and CEO of Junior Achievement in Washington State, which is the largest organization dedicated to helping children develop certain skills, including about their economic success. And she is the first Latina and the first female person of color to lead Junior Achievement in the state of Washington in its 69-year history. She's also the first Latina board president of the National Association for the Education of Children. Again, a lot of firsts. And so among her many accomplishments, she's created bilingual play-based birth to 5 programs, trying to promote children's well-being and their racial and geographic equity. So we're really thrilled to have her here with us today. And our third presenter is really going to help us look at the research. Dr. Lisa Lopez is a Cuban-American professor of educational psychology at the University of South Florida. She earned a PhD in applied developmental psychology and has had many high-level fellowships and research grant opportunities. Her main research objective is to identify the normative development of school readiness skills of Latino children with a focus on their educational and environmental opportunities. Now, this is what is just one of the things that is so impressive about Lisa, is that she is the past chair of the Society for Research in Child Development Latinx Caucus. And many of you will know that Society for Research in Child Development is a preeminent organization dealing with research on young children. But now she is the incoming treasurer of SRCD altogether, and she is the associate editor of the prestigious Child Development Journey. She's won so many awards for her scholarly work with Latino dual language learning populations. And she's published a book about this, which we will present to you in our follow-up email, so you will have that resource. And so we're really thrilled that she brings her considerable research knowledge and expertise to finding practical strategies to working with these children. Now, before we get started today, I want to give you a few reminders. We do record these webinars. We record them because many of our practitioners are with children right now, and in order for them to be able to listen and learn from this webinar, we offer it to them free as a recording. Closed captioning is available, and I want to remind you at the very end of the webinar, you'll be getting a link that will take you to a Zoom chat. So if you have a question you want to direct to Marta or Natalie or Lisa, click that chat and you'll be able to get in a conversation with them. And throughout this presentation, please write in the chat and let us know your thoughts and what you're thinking. So let's think about how we can leverage Latinx leadership in policy, practice, and research. Let's think about the changing demography, the opportunities we can provide for children, and the policy strategies that we need. Let's listen and learn and interact with our distinguished panelists, Marta Rosa, Natalie Vega O'Neill, and Lisa Lopez. Join me in welcoming them. We're really excited about this panel, and we're going to start today with Marta Rosa. Marta, welcome to the CAYL Catalyst seminar. We'd love to hear from you. Tell us a little bit about your ideas on how we leverage Latinx leadership. Welcome, Marta.
Thank you, Valora, and thank you, CAYL staff, for continuing to bring us the early education and care community together to learn, share, and explore critical issues that face families across the globe and educators. You know, the growth of the Latino population in the country is very visible today. For some of us, it's always been visible, but today it's very visible. We're in the media, we're everywhere across this globe. Our public schools and early education programs are enriched by bilingual students and immigrants from a variety of Spanish-speaking countries. Our Latino youth are entering college and the workforce in higher numbers. But we have serious concerns, as you all know. Our Latino youth, though they are entering college in larger numbers, they are also not completing in large numbers. The lack of financial resources, the family responsibilities at times, the pandemic, for example, especially exacerbated Latinos stepping out of education, and we're working, many of us, to try to figure out how to get the students back. Our institutions across the education spectrum do not reflect the increase we have seen within leadership, particularly, nor in the classrooms many times. I always ask my grandchildren, so how many Latina teachers do you know? And normally the answer is barely none, or one that doesn't really speak Spanish. Anyway, a couple of things that we know, though, is our Latino families are continuing to grow. We're having babies and many more immigrants are arriving every day. Another thing that we know is that we are a relatively young population, but now with several generations in the States. I'm Puerto Rican. My mom brought myself and my three sisters here in 1968. We're now with our fourth generation here in the States. When I got here, I was 9.5 years old, spoke no English, and was enrolled during the days when there was no bilingual education. And to be honest, the principal that was enrolling me in school, there was no one that spoke Spanish. And so my mother didn't know what to do. And when they said to her, oh, she was in 6th grade in Puerto Rico, we're going to put her in 4th grade. There was no advocate for me at that point in time. And lost 2 grade levels. Over 50 years later, many of us who came during that time are still trying to figure out, so what was that all about? That you're supposed to learn English if they lower your 2 grades. That robbed my generation at least of chronological years of earnings. Today, as a consultant, I am a strategic advisor for the EOS Foundation. And in that role, I was glad to help out in starting the Women's Power Gap initiative 5 years ago. What we do in that work is we look at data to see whether women and people of color are reflected in the top leadership positions of major systems, including higher education, elementary and secondary education, corporations, public boards and commissions, etc. Guess who's not reflected within the top leadership positions? It's mostly Latinas or Latinos. There are either very few, or particularly in higher education and public education, the numbers are very small or non-existent. That is a problem. Representation not only matters, but it must be an imperative, because we have to have people in top leadership positions that understand the Latino community and understand the families and the construct. I have been engaged in education my entire career, starting with early childhood. At the age of 18, you all, I was a baby, and I spent over 30 years in that field, but have also worked in public education as an elected school committee member, and in higher education for over almost 20 years now. If I am being honest, it is a span of over 40 years steeped in program development, advocacy, policy, and strategic system thinking. The more things change, sometimes I feel, the more things stay the same. There are still times when I'm the only Latina at a decision-making table, at a meeting that I'm on. Early in my career, my engagement was in direct service, later in administration, and always advocacy was a part of that work. As a young professional, I worked at a place called a Kangaroo's Pouch Child Care Center in Chelsea. When I became really frustrated with the guidelines and the policies that the state was promulgating that I had to use with my families, I felt those policies were not supportive to families, and I questioned them. And I felt that they didn't align with bilingual communities. I moved my work to the state level, where I worked at the Department of Social Services Child Care Unit, mainly because I wanted to get a better understanding of how these policies were made and who was making them. Curiosity, asking the question, is critically important. When something doesn't feel good in your gut, ask the question. An old friend told me, there's no stupid question except the one that's not asked. And so I've always held on to that. I spent 3 years as a program and policy analyst at the state level, where it was a learning opportunity. I used it to learn a lot, and I used it to make good connections and create a network that has stayed with me throughout my career. And then I moved back to the community, you all, because the state level was just not sufficing my curiosity and my passion for my work. It's really important to know what your passion is and what you care about and where you want to represent. I took on an executive leadership role, as Valora shared, running a childcare resource and referral agency, an early childhood nonprofit organization, where that platform gave me the opportunity to promote policies, practices for all families, ensuring that services were culturally relevant during my stay there, and fighting for relevancy of cultural identity and multilingual services for families at the state level. That position also allowed me to do a lot of local, state, and national work and advocacy. Through there, I became the national president for the National Child Care Resource and Referral Agency, which is now called Child Care Aware. That gave me a national platform to work on the issues that I cared about. Each position that I served in, I worked to build coalitions, partnerships, and to ensure diversity and inclusion of families and the staff who educate and care for children. It's really important that the people at decision-making tables understand the value of the voices of the people that they're trying to impact. The challenge, of course, throughout my career, as I mentioned, is that many times, whether it was at a local level, state level, or national level, I was the lone Latina sitting at a high-level policy or planning table. Usually, and I didn't have a problem speaking my mind, but there should have been more people sitting at that table, more people from the community. What I did, I have grown very thick skin, you all, and have used every opportunity, every table to learn, listen, and effectively articulate the needs of Latino families, youth, and children, but doing that without taking away from also informing myself and discussing the needs of all families, because there is more similarity that unites us than that divides us. And so that's really important to me. In 1989, while I was working for the Department of Social Services, still frustrated with what I was learning and how policies were made and who made them, I ran for elected office in my city, and I became the first Latina to win elected office in the city of Chelsea, Massachusetts, and one of the first 3 elected Latinos in the state of Massachusetts. Why did I run? It wasn't because I was looking for something more to do. It was because I saw an injustice, you know, that feeling you get in the pit of your stomach that things are just not okay and people are not being treated well. I ran because there was a lack of representation of Latino voices, Latino talent, and culture. I ran because I got tired of hearing about all the bad statistics that plague Latino communities. I wanted to make sure that there was a voice talking about our talent and our assets in our community and what we brought to the table as bilingual concerned citizens, and the largest minority group at that time in the city. Each leadership position I held, however, included whether it was being president of the National Association at the national level, or at a community gathering or a group, or the Commission on Hispanic Affairs that I started in 1989, 1990, afforded me a platform. And what was that platform for? It's really important when you have a platform and you're representing to think about, why are you there? Who are you there for? And for me, it was about ensuring the needs of children, families, and the workforce were at the center of the discussion. If we keep the children in the center, we have better discussion. For me, it was about calling out the lack of representation and the need to speak with those whose lives we were trying to impact with policies and practices and programs. It was about articulating the value of having racially reflective tables. It was about mentoring others and supporting others. Elected office is an interesting platform because that opened up a lot of doors in terms of furthering the work that I was passionate about, both at the local, state, and national opportunities for leadership. Somehow, when you say you've been or you are an elected official, that just opens doors. It's a good platform. If ever considered running for office, please do so. My professional journey has been enriched, I have to say, by mentors and colleagues that are fighting the good fight. It's really important when you are sitting at tables that you also have your tribe, your group of people, your folks that are supporting you and helping you and letting you know that it's okay to speak up. It's okay when you don't get your way. It's okay to keep fighting. And it's good to know that there is a tribe fighting with you. The Latino community is extremely diverse within itself. And as a Puerto Rican woman raised in this country, it has been very important for me to continuously learn about my own community. We are the fastest growing group in many states. And in Massachusetts, we're no longer just in the urban areas, but we're in small towns and in the suburbs. As advocates for Latino children, we must understand the nuances of our families and what is important and priority in raising our children. In 2018, myself and a group of Latino educators got together and created an organization called Peace in pursuit of excellence, accountability, and success for Latino students. It is a group that works statewide on advocacy research and on education programs across the continuum of education spectrum, from early childhood through college and beyond. It has been important for me to find avenues such as this, where I work with like-minded, passionate colleagues. It keeps us centered, supported, and hopeful. It can be challenging I'll be honest, it can be really challenging at the mostly all white tables, but good mentors, supportive colleagues make a difference and keep our spirits up. It's no secret that classrooms across the country are extremely diverse with children from a variety of language groups. What are the questions? Are our programs ready to meet their learning needs? Are the advocates sitting at decision-making tables calling out their issues? Are the policymakers focused on all children? These questions are important as we consider the level we're going to fill in the field. It's important to sit at the highest tables, to speak our truth and find ways to influence policy and practice. I'm going to close with this. I have learned a lot as I have grown professionally, and I've had a long journey. I've learned that networking is critical, maintaining relationships even more so. I have people that I only see 3 times a year or once a year, but they're my network. I've learned that honesty with myself and others is key. I've learned that advocacy does work, especially when done effectively and in coalition. I've learned it is important to point out inequities and injustices. And I don't have to fix those, but I have a responsibility for calling them out and ensuring that whoever is responsible can fix them. I've learned that systems can be changed to ensure cultural relevance. It takes collaborative work and ingenuity. I've learned that being open to other points of view is key to being able to affect change. And I've learned that being open to learning is key. I've learned that owning your power and inner strength is invaluable. And I've really learned that data collection and analysis is crucial. We have to know how many of us there are, how many children are served, who is in power, what are the decision levers to be pulled. We have to know our community. We have to know the numbers, and we have to push systems to collect the data, to report the data. Only that which is measured is valued. And so measuring and collecting data, analyzing that data, putting it out, reporting it is important. And I've learned that keeping yourself nourished, supported, and hopeful is important, critical. It is a journey. Stay the course, speak your truth with kindness, and believe the future can be better. Representation not only matters, but it is an imperative. It is a must, especially throughout the continuum of education, where we're impacting the lives of not just this generation, but generations to come. And starting with early childhood education is critical. It is a matter of racial equity, social justice, and commitment to this next generation. Thank you so much. And now let me turn it over to Natalie.
Thank you, Marta, so much. Hello, everyone. It's a joy to be with all of you today. And I just want to thank the CAYL Institute and Valora for inviting me to this conversation. I'm really happy to be with you and my fellow panelists, Marta and Dr. Lopez, to have this important conversation and shine a light on the early childhood field and particularly Latinx educators. As Valora said, I have the honor to be the governing board president for the National Association for the Education of Young Children. And for those of you who aren't familiar with our organization, NAEYC is the largest professional association for early childhood educators in the world, and we have close to 60,000 members. The vision of the organization is that each and every child thrives and learns in a society dedicated to ensuring all children reach their full potential. We think it's so critical that we provide the space for that to happen. And our mission is to promote high quality early learning for each and every child birth through age 8. And what we do is connect practice to policy and research. And we advance a diverse and dynamic early childhood profession and support all who care for, educate, and work on behalf of young children. And we advance the mission and the vision and the values through our work and partnership that we have with 51 state and regional affiliates. And then some of you may utilize our resources. So we produce rich content through books and journals and professional development opportunities, including the largest early childhood conference in the US that has close to 10,000 attendees. And here in the United States, we have a longstanding accreditation system for early childhood programs that's also recognized in 32 QRIS systems. And we also accreditate institutions of higher education preparing early childhood educators at the associate's, bachelor's, and master level degree programs. And then we also can support globally. We've been able to assist countries with translating this research-based quality standards into early childhood systems. that center developmentally appropriate practice to support children, families, and educators. And so I think a wonderful way to describe NAEYC is that our work really builds bridges. We want to build bridges that link educators to the resources, supports, and systems that contribute to their success as professionals and contribute to their well-being as critical members of our communities. And we want to build bridges that ensure that the workforce of today is part of the workforce of tomorrow through steadfast focus on advocacy work, the implementation of a unifying framework for early childhood professions, and through a relentless commitment towards advancing equity in early childhood education. We take all of this work very seriously at NAEYC. We're committed to centering the voices and stories of the workforce in every single thing that we do. And I'm just really thrilled today to have this conversation around leveraging Latinx leaders and Latinx leadership, particularly in early childhood, because these voices and stories are critical to the work that we do at NAEYC. And the reality is that the current childcare system is buckling under its own weight. We all know that early childhood educators are forced to survive on poverty level wages. And meanwhile, parents are struggling to pay for childcare services that allow them to work, that allow them to attend school, and to fully contribute to our society. And we see across the United States, educators, directors, childcare business owners, and many others express a deep concern for what lies ahead for our field if we don't get the sustained, substantial financial investment we know is necessary to advance a diverse, well-prepared, and well-compensated early childhood profession. So our members at NAEYC have spoken about the responsibility that they feel towards programs, towards fellow educators, and the families and children in care. Our members have also shared the toll that this is having on their health and well-being, because it compounds the weight and stress of being in a profession that's woefully undercompensated and spoken of as essential, yet often treated as expendable. And the reality is that even before the pandemic started, being a member of the early child profession was tough, but the devastating blow of the past 3 years have really made it even more challenging. That's why, even despite all of these challenges that we have ahead of us, I have a lot of hope right now. I'm really thankful to be able to have this chance as the governing board president for NAEYC, and know that my own lived experiences are able to highlight the challenges and the joys of the early childhood profession. This topic of Latinx representation in early childhood education, it's deeply personal to me. I grew up in a very close-knit, large Mexican-American family, and we were centered around children, the children in our family. And because of that, I developed a very strong desire to create safe spaces for all children, no matter the circumstances that they're coming from or that they live in. And I thought that I would be in the field of child psychology when I was younger, and it really wasn't until I attended graduate school at the Erickson Institute that I learned about advocacy and the definition of advocacy and what it meant to advocate on behalf of children. And at the same time, I learned about NAEYC when I was in graduate school, and NAEYC's mission to advocate on behalf of all children and those who care for them. And one of NAEYC's core values, that children and adults achieve their full potential in the context of trusting and respectful relationships, really aligns with my personal values and my dreams of all children having those safe, supportive relationships that allow them to reach their full potential. And I had realized that I had found an organization that matched my beliefs and my aspirations, and I wanted to be part of the efforts. I felt compelled to run for president of this membership organization because of my commitment to the mission and the values and the beliefs of NAEYC. And I know that now more than ever, NAEYC is and will continue to be unapologetic in our advocacy and commitment to the field. And that commitment includes raising up educators marginalized because of their race, culture, and other aspects of their identities. And NAEYC, in my role being the first Latina governing board president, it's not lost on me around the honor that this comes with, and that NAEYC has a priority and obligation to represent and reflect the field. And our membership at NAEYC from the Latino community is woefully behind compared with other demographics. We have just under 4% of our members self-identify as Latino or Latina. And this is a really important piece of my presidency and the leadership at NAEYC. We're using every aspect of NAEYC to ensure that we're highlighting the diversity of the field, including Latina educators. We've really made inroads just recently over the past several months that we've had the chance to elevate the voices of Latina educators. We partnered with the White House to support NAEYC member and director of NAEYC accredited ACA Child Development Center, Maria Vallevillan, as she introduced Vice President Harris in speaking about childcare. Nicole Lazarte, who's my fellow board member, she's our student governing board member. She joined NAEYC CEO Michelle King on Capitol Hill last summer to advocate for a continued investment in childcare. And then just last week, we were able to showcase Annie Reyes, who's the program director of an NAEYC accredited downtown Baltimore child care. She introduced Senator Patty Murray, who we all know is a huge champion of early childhood education, at the launch of the Child Care for Working Families Act. And so we've been very intentional about leveraging the voices of Latina early childhood educators. And these are just a few examples of how we're going to continue to be intentional about this and use our platform as a national organization to elevate these diverse voices and ensure that we're creating a community of belonging for all who work for and on behalf of children. And part of my work and part of my leadership at NAEYC really is going to focus on continuing to connect with the Latinx community and developing meaningful ways to engage with Latinx educators, members, and advocates. If you're an NAEYC member, thank you for your membership. If you aren't, I hope that today's conversation will pique your interest and that you'll become part of the community of NAEYC. We've been fostering and growing this community for almost 100 years. And this is truly a community that allows you to receive tools and supports to strengthen your practice and your work, to engage in ways to amplify your voice and to join in our advocacy efforts. As well as continue to experience what it's like to be part of a network that's 60,000 plus strong. And NAEYC as an organization is the unequivocal voice for the early childhood education profession. And I know that as we continue to face these challenges, it's going to require our continued attention, our resilience, and our commitment. So my charge for everybody here today, myself included, is to call on all of us to take action with us, to take action with NAEYC, and to join the work that we're doing around amplifying the voice of educators and getting fair wages and compensation for the field. So I appreciate the time that I've had here today. I look forward to continuing our discussion, and I'm going to pass it to Dr. Lisa Lopez.
Thank you, Natalie, as well as Valora and the CAYL Institute. And I'm honored to have been invited to be part of this webinar alongside Natalie and Marta. And so as a Latinx professor in higher education, I think it's crucial that we be responsive to this changing landscape with regard to the student population in preschool all the way through the university level, right? And both Marta and Natalie alluded to that. So I'm a full professor. Only about 2% of full professors are Latino women. And so that comes with a lot of responsibility. And I wouldn't have gotten here without mentors and others ahead of me who've opened those doors for me and who've pulled me up with them. And it's because of this that I also put myself out there. I'm here with you, and hopefully I'm seen by Latinx students, junior faculty, and others as both a role model and a mentor. I know that path can be foggy, but with the support of others, it definitely becomes clear. At my home institution, the University of South Florida, I teach at all levels, undergraduate, master's, doctoral. I mentor students. I serve on advisory committees for university leadership, including a presidential advisory committee on Latinx issues. And as part of this committee, we advise the university president on the needs of Latinx faculty, on issues of recruitment, of promotion, and of retention for both faculty and staff who identify as Latino. And we speak to prospective and to incoming Latino students on how to be successful in college as a Latino student. Many are first generation, many have the parents don't have experience with the college experience. And so we really represent the faculty and the staff in welcoming the students and trying to mentor those students so that they have a successful time at the university level, because representation matters. And so these new students seeing Latinx faculty in leadership positions will hopefully serve them as inspiration as they go through college and hopefully graduate school and become leaders within their own profession. Within my professional organization, the Society for Research and Child Development, I've held several leadership positions, as Laura mentioned. I've also used these positions to really help mentor and center junior faculty and graduate students within the profession. So as chair of the Latinx caucus, for example, it was important for me to advocate for the needs of my Latino members, particularly early career members, nominating them for awards and committees, encouraging them to apply for grants, and providing professional development opportunities. It's really crucial that we provide a space for those who come after us to be seen and to develop confidence in who they are and to develop the skills that they need in order to have that confidence. With so few Latino faculty in higher ed, sometimes we're the only ones in our department or even in our college. I was actually the only one in my graduate program who was Latino. So creating a support network is crucial to academic success, but it's also crucial for mental health and well-being. Being the only one can feel burdensome, it can be overwhelming. Being the sole representative for an entire community, it can be exhausting. And building a network of peers is necessary in order to avoid burnout. I 100% agree with what Marta said. You need to network, you need to create a community so that you can move forward. Through my roles at SRCD, I've been able to be the voice of Latino members, advocating for those Latinos who don't have a voice. And I've tried to use my leadership for good by representing those who can't advocate for themselves. And sometimes that means pushing for content that's meaningful for our populations. For example, I pushed for a statement of the evidence regarding children being separated at the border to be distributed not only to our members, but to the community and to policymakers. We also created a brief on the impact of the pandemic on Latino families. We published that brief through the organization, but also went ahead and wrote an op-ed that was picked up by media outlets. And we wrote a piece for school administrators on how to support Latino children returning back after the pandemic, which was published in a trade journal for administrators. So as leaders, we need to think about how we not only represent, but we're also advocating for our communities. We need to leverage and take advantage of the power that we have in order to do good. Another initiative I've been working on is trying to push for federal funding agencies to fund more Latino researchers to do the research on Latino populations. While I myself have been fortunate to receive federal grants to do my research, it's not really the norm for Latino researchers. We found that federal agencies, including NICHD, IES, ACF, that typically fund work with and research with early childhood, don't typically fund Latino researchers. They either fund non-Latinos to do the research or don't fund work with Latinos at all. So we're really starting to push these agencies to revisit the funding process on who is getting funded to do what work, calling for work done with Latino children and families to have researchers who represent their families, the families that they're studying as PIs. We also need to have more professional development to train Latinos on writing grants and on the process for obtaining grants. Finally, in my research, I work with early childhood teachers with a focus on meeting the needs of Latino children and understanding how Latino children are learning and developing cognitive skills. Part of this work is promoting the cultural and linguistic diversity these children are bringing into the classroom. This means training teachers to both value and respect the funds of knowledge children bring with them. Many times, Latino teachers don't realize the assets they also bring into the classroom. And being able to communicate and empower the children in their classrooms as Latinas themselves is crucial. Oftentimes, the leaders who are not Latino don't understand the research on dual language learners. For example, we found that promoting home language development helps young Latino children develop their English skills. We've also found that there's lots of heterogeneity among Latino preschool children. And so we cannot consider a one-size-fits-all approach to working with Latino children. They come in with their own experiences, both linguistically and culturally. And it's important to value their experiences and build on those experiences, including promoting home language instruction and valuing their individual cultures. I'm a strong advocate for creating a leadership pipeline for Latino teachers. It's an important initiative we all need to be engaged in. As more Latino children enroll in our schools, we're going to need leaders that not only represent them, but understand their culture, their language, and we need to change the systems to meet the needs of the students instead of changing the students to meet the needs of the system. Thank you. And now we'll move to the group discussion.
Thank you so much. I've learned so much and really appreciate what each of you, Marta, Natalie, and Lisa have had to share. Thank you. We're really focused today on how do we leverage Latinx leadership. And what we really see in all of your experiences is that each of you has recognized and experienced the isolation of being the only one. This is what and being able to excel even in that context, but also being committed so that the next generation doesn't have to be that only one or that first. And so I see each of you having a very strong commitment to that. So you've talked a lot about why representation matters. And, Marta, you mentioned that data collection and analysis is very critical. And Lisa talked about how some of the challenges of people really supporting Latino researchers to do this research. Data does matter. I think it's only because of the changing demographics that this is becoming more and more important. How can we really help people as a strategy move toward really understanding the data? And also, I'm going to add, not necessarily being threatened by the data, because some people look at the changing demographics and it inspires in them a feeling of fear or a feeling of confusion. Can any of you speak to that? How sometimes other people hear that data to it necessarily positive way.
Well, I can talk. I mean, I've done a lot of partnership work with him. And so I often sit with them and I sit on school readiness boards for my local Head Start programs and work with them on looking at their data. And oftentimes what I've encountered is that they don't have the system to be able to collect a lot of the data. So I can tell you one anecdote of, I was working with a local Head Start program here in the state of Florida, and they told me, we have a lot of Latino children, but we think that a lot of the families are speaking indigenous languages at home, and Spanish is not really their first language, it's their second language. But we have no way of collecting that data. Families, I think, are not wanting to tell us about this. And so there was on the side of the Head Start administrators, they wanted to know so that they can learn what to do to be able to help support these families. But then they didn't know how to collect this data in a way that was open for the families to give them that data, or even had a system to do that. And so we were collecting data in that agency for a project. So I was like, oh, I'll just add it to my questionnaire for the parents. So I was able to add it to the questionnaire. We were able to get really good data on, yes, in fact, there was a lot of the families were speaking in Otomi or some other language at home. Then it was not the early childhood community had an inkling, but it wasn't validated until we were able to collect that data and then sit down and like, okay, what do we do with that? And so I think it's maybe sitting down with local Latino researchers, which there's not a lot of us, but that are willing to help with partner with looking at the data, thinking about how to answer those questions. Data should not be scary. And we really need to think about, like I said at the end of my saying, we need to change the system to meet our needs. We don't need to change ourselves or what we're doing to meet the needs of the system. And so I think it's a mindset, a lens shift, and data can really help us. But it really depends on what perspective we have on how we look at the data. So data can be scary, but data can also be helpful in helping us to change those systems. And so partnering with people that can do the data. I mean, I have stats people that help me, but I think that's important, is developing partnerships. And I think Head Start's done a really good job of that. I think other early childhood communities can also do that as well, is reach out and partner with researchers and others that can really help them.
I think, Valora, there's another side to the fear, which is that, there are many people who are fearful that they're losing their grip on their society because their society is changing, and the demographics are not stopping. We're becoming a very racially diverse society here, particularly in the States. And so there is that fear that we have to address as well. When I work with leaders that are not collecting data that they need to collect, I'm very bold and very blunt with them. How do you plan if you don't have data? Because there's the community understanding the data, right? And researchers like you, Lisa, making sure that the data is presented in a way that communities can use it, that it's active, right? That we can use it to go to the State House, to go here, to go there. I love taking data when I'm advocating and doing legislative work, for example. But then there are those institutions that are the gatekeepers of resources for lots and lots and hundreds of children. And if they don't collect data on what our community needs are and who they're serving in our community, how do they know how to plan? And so I think advocates just have to use their platform and their voice, their strength to be bold and just tell them they need to be intentional. They need to work with culturally relevant researchers. I don't want a white person coming to interview my family. I don't. I've had the experience of institutions, white-led institutions coming into communities and trying to do research on our folks. Of course, they're not a trusted person. It has to be a trusted source, like Lisa, for example, that asks the questions. Our communities have been through enough. There's enough feet that have kicked them. And so it has to be a trusted source. And so there's that part of the fear that comes. It's also, I tell my white colleagues, for example, that it's not about getting them out of the way to have reflective representation. It's really, we just want a seat at the table. And there was someone that said, if they don't give you the seat, just bring your own chair and put it there. So it is about having that ability to talk bluntly yet kindly. I don't know if you understand what I mean, but having those tough conversations. And unfortunately, in this country, we have forgotten how to have civil discourse and how to disagree in a friendly, kind way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Natalie, I see you nodding your head as Lisa and Marta are speaking, and you spoke earlier about the value of your lived experience. And I wonder what your reflections are on this question.
Coming from an early childhood, preschool and childcare lens, I would encourage everyone to utilize the power of parents. I think that when we have had a very similar experience happen to me as to Lisa with the charter school that I co-founded, the early childhood charter school, where it was a port of entry neighborhood, and we had families from many different countries speaking Indigenous language. And so while we were translating and educating the students in Spanish, it wasn't their home language. And even the communications that we were sending home, parents couldn't understand if they didn't speak, Spanish and they spoke an Indigenous language. So it was a wonderful learning opportunity. But then I used the advocates that I could find and help leverage their voices in parents. And there were some parents who were really willing and eager to amplify their voices and their lived experiences and their culture and their language to help educate the rest of us. And so I think that for those that are providers or business owners or work in the classroom, a wonderful way to help amplify and leverage leadership, because leadership comes in all different types and forms and ways, is allowing parents to have leadership opportunities within our programs and in our classrooms, and really allowing them to bring their lived experiences to have a seat at the table and help enrich the experience that the children, the educators, and the families have in our programs.
Yeah, what you're all pointing to is the diversity, the tremendous diversity that is within the Latinx community. And you're bringing up an important point that I bet many people in our community have not thought about, that you're making an assumption that everybody's first language was Spanish. And what I'm hearing you say is that's not necessarily the case. That's a question that might be asked in certain circumstances. We have in the chat, Rosemary Hernandez is asking a question that I've heard many, many times over the years, and that is that because many Latinos feel they're constantly having to prove themselves in the workplace, in the policy space. And so the question becomes, and I hear this question a lot, should you continue to try to fit in existing systems or try to create new systems? What do you think about that?
I would say I, as I had shared earlier, grew up in an environment and in a family where I never knew that anybody's voice was more powerful than anyone else's. I also grew up in a family with all girls. I'm one of three daughters, and I never knew that there were situations where women or people of a certain race or ethnicity, were looked upon less than others. And so I've always, similar to what Martha was saying, was using my voice no matter what table I'm at, because that's all that I've known. And I think the most important thing that I have always tried to do over the course of my career is to make room for other, especially and most importantly, in my case, to me personally, other Latinx leaders. And so through mentoring, through, staying in touch with, through really making sure that I am, leading in the way that will allow others to come behind me in the leadership experience that I've been privileged to have, because as Lisa and Martha had shared, some of my most important and life-changing mentors have been Latinx women, and it's been pivotal to my professional career and my personal experiences as well, that I've had these role models and mentors who have taken the time to support me. And that's something that I always try to do, is to create inclusive environments for Latinas, and making sure that, my seat at the table is not the only seat at the table, and raising awareness around, that it's important for us to all, move forward together, and that the lived experiences each one of us has is equally important, and that making sure that I'm making room for the next generation of leaders, particularly in early childhood, that will be coming after me.
Well, thank you. Unfortunately, we're going to have to end right here due to time restraints. If you want to have a conversation with our three panelists, please click the link that you will find in the chat box, and that's going to take you to a Zoom meeting where you can actually interact with our speakers and ask them any questions or make any comments on what you're hearing today. So what we're really hearing today is that leveraging Latinx leader is important. Representation matters. It needs to be respectful of the lived experiences of the diverse communities so that we can create a place where we're creating equity. We're inviting you to join us next month as we talk about the fiscal cliff that's coming in early childhood funding. There's been a lot of funding pouring in because of COVID. A lot of that funding is going to end. What can we do about that as advocates? And join us in July when we talk about how we really build that next generation of leaders that Natalie was talking about. We need people to be coming behind us and carrying on this very strong legacy. So please click the link and join us in the conversation with the panelists. And on behalf of all of us, our whole team at the CAYL Institute, we thank you so much for joining this webinar today, and look forward to seeing you as we continue the conversations on the first Thursday of every month. Good night. Join us in the link. Thank you.